In this lessons episode, discover how to break out of the mold with an elegant strategy built on the principles of time, games, empathy, and systems. Learn why focusing on these core components helps simplify complex challenges and drives breakthrough innovation. Understand how aligning your strategy with genuine customer needs transforms potential into lasting success. When somebody wants to break out of the mold, so you talk about threads of strategy, you talk about sort of the four components, you talk about time, games, empathy, and systems. Can you explain a little bit about somebody's listening to this, or like, yes, I do feel like I want to, this resonates with me a lot, but I don't have a playbook for it because that's what they're looking for. I don't have a playbook for it. So what's the advice to that person?
All right, so let's break these into pieces. Let's start with time, because it's invisible and so important. You have one of the most important podcasts in the world. When you launched your podcast in week 1, how many listeners did you have?
My mom.
Yeah. Like, anyone who's telling the truth doesn't pick a number over 10, right? Yeah. So how did this happen? Day by day, drip by drip. You bet on time. You said, if I keep planting this seed and then that seed, and I water them and fertilize them and keep doing it, then I will get to where I'm going. Time must be seen in order to have a strategy. How do you expect time to unfold? We all get tomorrow over one time. What are you going to do with it? That's number 1. Number 2 are games. Games are any activity where there's an outcome, rules, players. And if you call it a game, you get to use game theory, and you don't have to take yourself so seriously, right? So before we roll tape, you and I were talking about making a Halloween-themed episode where we would both turn off the lights and do it in a spooky way. And it's easy to talk about that because even if we did it, the risk would be an hour of our time. So that's a move. If it doesn't work, it's not because we're bad people. It's because we made a move that didn't work. So when we approach marketplaces, we have to have a game theory in mind. If I do this, then what will happen? If I do this, then what will happen? Game. Third one is empathy. Empathy, I'm not talking about this kindness. I'm talking about realizing you don't have power. Other people have power. They get to say yes. They get to pick you. They get to buy from you. So the only way that's going to happen is if you offer them something they want. You're not them. But you have to think like you are, or else they'll say no. And too often entrepreneurs who have worked super hard, maybe they're in over their head or they have debt, say, well, this one's important. Do it because I said so. And that never works. And the fourth one is systems. And systems are all around us, and they're invisible, and they're incredibly powerful. So my favorite example is the wedding industrial complex, which is a system. What's the right amount of money to spend on a wedding? And the answer is exactly as much as your best friend plus $1. And that's why weddings cost $100,000 now, because the system only turns in one direction. And systems are based on networks. They're based on culture. Systems like to defend themselves, so they build culture to defend themselves. And at their heart, they have status and affiliation keeping them going. So if you don't see the system, you can't dance with it, you can't work with it, and you definitely can't change it.
This may be an overly simplistic question, and tell me if it is, but do you feel like there could be one or two of these that should be a primary focus when somebody's building something new, or should they focus on all four simultaneously?
I think it depends on what you're building. So if you're a parent, time is the dominant one, because that kid's going to be different tomorrow. If you're building an elementary school, time kicks in so many different directions. You're going to have the kids for years. The building's going to last for years. You're not building a school for today. It's not a festival. It's a school. On the other hand, in the tech world, systems are dominant. You've got the system of Moore's Law, which says, just bet that bandwidth is going to get cheaper, connections are going to get faster, chips are going to get cheaper. So 10 years ago, when people started working on LLMs and AI, the world couldn't support it, but you could make a bet on the system shifting. As a creative entrepreneur, for me, games are often high on the list because I like seeing how the pieces fit together. So when I invented email marketing all those years ago, I did it because I saw a game that could be played. And then empathy is throughout all of this, because sooner or later, somebody else has got to deal with you. There are some billionaires out there in the world who have no empathy, and we're watching them self-destruct before our eyes because they have such a big ego and so much money that they don't care, but it's brittle. It doesn't stick around.
I'm really happy you said that, because somebody would look at a billionaire that's self-destructing and they would say, well, they achieved success. They encapsulated some sort of strategy. So how can you tell me that you need empathy? Because look at what they've done. But then this actually brings us to something you said right when we kicked it off. And I think this is what we're trying to build, an elegant strategy, not just a strategy, but an elegant strategy. And you don't use words just by chance. So what does elegant strategy mean? And talking to that person that feels like one of those four components isn't necessary.
Yeah, so an elegant strategy is the most efficient, easiest in the long run way forward. It's one where the systems are dancing with you and you are dancing with the systems. So here's a story I just learned. It's fantastic. Potatoes were discovered in Peru. Potatoes, they were discovered by people in Europe in Peru. And potatoes are one of the most extraordinarily efficient ways to feed a human being. And they came to Europe in the late 1500s, early 1600s. And they had a big problem, which is they were low status. They came from far away from people who were seen as less sophisticated than the colonialists. And they were almost banned in England, and they were banned in France. And the reason they were banned in France is there was a theory that foods looked like the part of the body that they supported. So walnuts you should eat for brain health because they look like little brains. And no one had ever seen a potato before, and they looked at the potato and they said, potatoes look like the fingers of someone with leprosy. So you shouldn't eat a potato or you'll get leprosy. And so there were no potatoes in France. And this entrepreneur who wanted to bring potatoes to his country saw he had a problem. Now we can think of 1,000 inelegant ways to solve this problem. What he realized was the potato's only problem was it was seen as low status. And high status people, particularly in those days, set the agenda. And status doesn't have to mean money, but in France in 1600 it did. Okay, so first thing he did is he got access to Marie Antoinette and he gave her a bunch of flowers from the potato plant and she wore them in her hair, and that created a little bit of a sensation. But the second thing he did that was so cool, a few miles away from Versailles, he got a farm, a plot of land, and he planted potatoes. And then he put armed guards all around the plot of land. And all day long, the guards were guarding the potatoes. And then at night, they went home and there was no night shift. So local people, seeing this valuable thing, snuck in and stole the potatoes. And the next thing you know, lots of people are eating potatoes. That's an elegant strategy. It didn't require a Super Bowl ad. It simply required understanding where in the culture was there spots that you could create tension and change people's minds.
Do you find that more often than not, again, with all the entrepreneurs that you study and you speak with, we have a tendency, for whatever reason, I'm sure you've figured it out, that we have all these unelegant strategies, these overcomplicated strategies?
Oh, yeah. There's a bunch of reasons. The first one is defensive, which is if we tell someone the simple truth, they could reject us, and then we got nothing. If we say, well, it's really complicated, then we always have room to update our story for them. And the second reason is nobody knows what we're doing better than us. And so because we lack empathy, we're just insisting they know what we know, and then they'll get the joke. But they're never going to know what we know. So we have to figure out how to get to where they are instead of demanding that they come to where we are.
When you look at, so you speak a lot about human desire and understanding humans and understanding what they want and what they need. So now we figured out the sort of like the 4 tenets of what good strategy is. How does this play into, I guess, the human desire component, the empathy component, so that our strategy actually resonates? Because we've figured out the pieces that we have to understand, but the second part of a strategy is always the customer, the human, the consumer.
The best thing you can hear from a customer is, oh, I was right all along. So Google didn't persuade people to search the internet. They just said, this is just like Yahoo, but way simpler and faster. So all the people who were waiting for something that was simpler and faster said, oh, great, I was right all along. I don't have to change my mind. If you're wasting time arguing with the non-believers, you've picked the wrong people, right? So there are people who are going to read the newspaper in print until the day they die. Stop trying to persuade them they should switch. There are other people who have said forever, oh, now I can read this on the subway. I wish I'd had, now I have this. Find the people who already want the output of what you make, but didn't know that what you make would help them get that output.
You know, when you say it, it makes so much sense. And this has been something that's been part of even the podcast marketing strategy, but it's so smart. It makes so much sense. When I advertise this podcast or I do a cross promotion, I am more inclined to advertise on another podcast and on a newsletter, because I don't need to convince people to like podcasts and then to like mine, or love podcasts and love mine. I just need people who already love podcasts to be aware that I exist. And that's it. It's so simple.
Yeah. So, if we think about shows that were the most popular TV shows in the glory days of the 60s and the 70s, they tended to be the second or third favorite show of a lot of people, not the favorite show of a few people. Because what you're saying is, for people who are going to watch something on television Thursday night, here it is. And when we're in a long tail world and you don't need 70 million viewers, that gets even easier, right? And so, sure, a brand like Patagonia has died in the world true believers, but there's also, they've grown because they've gotten the shoulder of that market. People are like, oh yeah, it would make my life a little bit better if I could add some Patagonia to my quiver. But they're not trying to persuade anybody who's looking for a $9 fleece on Amazon to turn around and buy a $200 Patagonia jacket.
Thanks for tuning in. If you found this valuable, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And if you want to dive deeper into this conversation, check out the links in the description to watch the full episode. See you in the next one.